Well, hi there. Well, I saw this article on the website for the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. I think it was yesterday. And it really said something in the first paragraph, which I already knew, and you probably already know, but it kind of slapped me in the face. And it made me want to talk about it a little bit today. And what they write in the first paragraph is the Ebola virus outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is a crisis of international magnitude in the making. At ASTMH, we see this outbreak, the second largest and second deadliest in history, as being on the brink of a potential disaster. And this is what really is what I wanted to talk about today. And yet it is nearly absent from day-to-day TV news. How true is that? How true is that? Without the necessary public and political will, the situation will move beyond disaster. ASTMH is alarmed at the lack of attention and funding this outbreak has received. And it's amazing that that's even a possibility here in the United States, right? We have at least three, maybe there's more, 24/7 cable news channels. And there's plenty of news. There's plenty of international news. There's our time for international news, time for U.S. type news. There's plenty of time for all this kind of stuff 24/7. But instead, what do we get, right? We get 24/7 of this is my team, this is your team, I hate this guy, I love this guy. And that's what we get. We get this. We get this. And we get this one, right? That's what we get. Instead, we're not hearing about this kind of stuff, right? Did you know that 400 people in Congress sent a letter to the president arguing that we should remain engaged in the conflict in Syria? They're very deeply concerned about extremist groups over there. Or maybe this is pretty important stuff that we need to be talking about. News, right? The massive deficit. This has been going on as long as I've been alive. And the federal deficit is already higher than in all but 5 full year deficits in U.S. history. So we have this debt that we're really ignoring and shoving underneath the rug. That's massive important news, and it's not being talked about. And then if we go overseas a bit, there's a lot of important news going on overseas too. How about what's going on with Boko Haram? This should be covered. This is important stuff. Don't know who they are? It's a terrorist group over in Nigeria. They've been in existence since about 2009, and latest data says there's been 20,000 deaths associated with this horrible terrorist group and all their debauchery. 20,000 deaths. And it's spreading outside of Nigeria and it's hitting up other African countries. So big news, and we barely hear this at all on cable news. How about just south of the border from us? Right now, there's been 5 journalists murdered in Mexico just this year. So Mexico has just earned themselves the dubious distinction of being the murder capital of the world for journalists. So yeah, a lot of news out there. So if you're 24/7, there's really no excuse for not covering a lot of this stuff. And that really takes me back to the ASTMH article. And say, yeah, that it's nearly absent from day-to-day TV news. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about cable news in the United States? They're not talking about this. This is an incredible, important news story. They're not talking about the measles outbreak in Ukraine that just went over 50, or is at about 50,000 cases since the beginning of the year. There's a lot of stuff they're not talking about. Yeah, so I just wanted to stress this, that ASTMH, they're right on target with this article, and I truly appreciate what they did. Well, let me go ahead and talk about the Ebola so we can take a look. of how bad it really is, right? Since the beginning of the epidemic, which I believe was right around August of last year, the cumulative number of cases is 1,826 with 1,738 confirmed and over 1,200 deaths in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That's not newsworthy, right? It's the second biggest Ebola outbreak in history since 1976. And there's also a lot of other crazy stuff that's going on there, a lot of violence and stuff that is making this epidemic that much worse and that much more out of control. And to shed a little light on that, we have Dr. Tedros. He's the Director General of the World Health Organization. He gave the keynote at the World Health Assembly yesterday. And he had a few things to say, and I wanted to share with you. And this is all incredibly newsworthy, I think. We can be proud of the fact that so far the outbreak has not spread outside of 2 provinces in DRC. But I emphasize so far, the risk of spread remains very high. Because this outbreak is one of the most complex health emergencies any of us have ever faced, we are fighting one of the world's most dangerous viruses in one of the world's most dangerous areas. We are fighting with even better tools than we used to extinguish the Ecuador outbreak in 3 months. That was the outbreak of Ebola in DRC just prior to this current outbreak. So far, we have vaccinated more than 120,000 people. And we now have evidence that vaccine is more than 97% effective in preventing Ebola. We also have 4 experimental treatments that have been used to treat 800 patients. And here we go. But we are not just fighting a virus. We are fighting insecurity. We are fighting violence. We are fighting misinformation. We are fighting mistrust, right? Almost every day we're hearing of these burial teams that are trying to bury the Ebola dead being attacked by people in the town. It's become just this crazy place, and we're fighting the politicization of an outbreak. Since January, there have been dozens of attacks on health facilities in North Kivu. Every attack disrupts our operations. Every attack makes it harder to reach communities. And every attack gives the virus an advantage and a disadvantage to the responders. News. And this should be covered on cable news. They should be talking about this as a news story and have expert guests on there. Bring on Anthony Fauci, bring on somebody from Doctors Without Borders to be discussing this stuff. The American people need to know. That's their job, is to report news, and we're just not getting it. So I want to ask you then, do you agree with me? Is cable news doing us a disservice? Are they really not doing their job? Or is it the problem that news is just passé now, and it's more important to put out your agenda or be for this guy or be against this guy? Or is it that news is not marketable anymore, right? I was alive when CNN first came on the scene, and it was essentially news and crossfire. That was your opinion, but it was news, pretty much most of the day. So would you like to see the so-called news television shows report on more important stories than what we're seeing today? I'd love to hear more about it. Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate you watching. Have a good one.
And don't forget to check us out at the website, outbreaknewstoday.com, the podcast, Outbreak News Interviews, which can be found on the website, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and Spotify, and the Outbreak News This Week radio show, which is aired Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time in the Tampa Bay area on AM 1380 The Biz, or online streaming at 1380thebiz.com. And check out our social media presence, Facebook at Infectious Disease News, and Twitter at BacDman63. Outbreak News TV is a production of The Global Dispatch. Copyright The Global Dispatch Incorporated, 2019.